those drinks. It's time for Sports Around the Bar. Welcome into Sports Around the Bar, your weekly sports talk show. As always, I am Jake, your bartender, and I'm joined on center stool by Drew. And today we are going to finish out our NCAA brackets that you guys have been deciding at home. And let me just tell you, the upsets kind of took a back seat last episode. You know, I think we had a little more conservative picks than we had in our first episode. I can't wait to see where you guys want to go in that direction. Drew, we're also talking NFL today. Is there anything you want to start by talking about?
Well, I mean, I'm always willing to talk about the NFL. Michael, what's going on, man? Matthew, again, super early. Glad you could join us as well.
We're talking Vikings today, Matthew. Glad to see you're in here. If you haven't heard, they have a pretty big signing in the offensive line. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Even though you don't like the signing.
Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, let's start with the games that have already been played in the NCAA tournament. I know it's still the play-in, get-in round, so it's not technically the tournament or anything, but Belmont has made its first appearance in the NCAA tournament in its school history, beating Temple 81-70, Drew. Now, I picked Belmont to upset in the first round. I really like this matchup. Even though they say they didn't play a very good game, they still managed to win by 11 points. They kind of blew Temple out of the water. What do you think, man? Going up in the first round against Maryland, can they beat the Terps? Can they kind of give them any kind of upset?
I mean, you're literally going to have the exact same game that Kevin McClure had with 29 points. He's going to have to put up big numbers again against Maryland, and it's going to be a struggle. As the coach said, they didn't play that great. I don't know what you feel about that, but I think
an 11-point win's okay, but they were sitting there saying offensively, defensively, they weren't happy with their performance. I guess they wanted a 20 or 25-point win there. And if they're going to win in the NCAA, I think against Maryland, they're going to have to put up their best showing. I think they're going to need to show up and have one of their best games if they're going to move on in the tournament.
What's going on, Nathan? Glad you could join us. Jerry?
Good morning as well.
I'm glad that you got your spot back.
Yeah, we're glad you're back from outer space, man. Good to see you as well. We're talking upsets here. I know you guys didn't have Belmont getting out of the first round, but let us know in the comments. Do you think they stand a chance to upset a team like the Terps sitting at a 6th seed, I believe it is?
Yes.
Yep. 6th seed? Or do you see Belmont just bouncing right out? The other team, Fairleigh Dickinson, made it into the tournament as well, winning 82-76 over Prairie View. I'm less optimistic about this one. I don't think either one of those teams is necessarily as dangerous as a team like Belmont is. Maybe it's just local flair that I'm caught up in, but Belmont's got some impressive games under their belt as well. And they're always just a little bit tougher of a basketball team on that second level. Usually they do stuff in the NIT or lower tournaments. But I think Belmont's a pretty good chance to upset. I really don't see that out of Fairleigh Dickinson.
Yeah, Fairleigh's going to have a hard problem with it, especially going against Gonzaga. It's just going to be too tough of a matchup. Talk about a team that's well-rounded, a lot of talent. It's going to be real tough to beat them.
And Nathan agrees with us. He has Maryland losing in the first round, and now I guess you have to say Belmont's going to win since they managed to outlast Temple. And Michael Wellborn says he didn't watch it, but he's waiting on the games come Friday. Well, the tournament starts on Thursday, just a little bit of a heads up there. Either way, everything will be decided by the end of tonight. Those other two games that are playoff games are going on pretty much right now, I think.
Yeah.
So we'll be talking about that probably Friday, although we may not even get the chance. They have a quick turnaround as well. So those teams might already be out before we get to talk about them.
It's definitely a possibility.
Moving on, though, I want to talk about Mookie Betts in baseball really quick. We're going to talk a lot of basketball here at the end of the show, but Mookie Betts has announced that he doesn't expect a long-term deal with the Red Sox, kind of like everyone else is getting paid in baseball. When you've got a 26-year-old, if you're the Red Sox, Drew, is it the right move to lock him up now? Or do you want to wait another couple of years and let him get close to that free agency and play chicken?
Guess it's up to you if you want to sign him for a 13-year, $400-some million contract.
You think that changes mine? It would change my mind.
It would change mine as well.
Well, right field obviously is not the most difficult position to replace in baseball. Do you see any kind of chance that when he's 28 they move on from him? They let him walk and let someone else make a $300 million mistake?
It's definitely a possibility. But I mean, let's not doubt it. I mean, this guy's a talented baseball player. You know, he's a big reason why the Red Sox are good offensively. I mean, there's no doubting that. So,
and Nathan's also saying he denied a $200 million extension. I would too when you see all this money flying around in baseball. You're 26, younger than a lot of these other guys that are getting paid right now, like Mike Trout, or at least Trout when he would come off his contract. I think Trout's only a year older, so I wouldn't say much older. And then you've got guys like Harper and Manny that are also older as well. If I'm Mookie Betts, I'm holding out for sure. Especially if you're talking $200 million, I'm going to absolutely wait on that.
Now, I want $400
yeah, exactly. I want $400 million. I get it. Right field is not as valuable as the infield, and you're not Mike Trout, but still, I mean, he's one of the best players in baseball. There's no reason he can't expect at least three bills, right?
That's what I'm thinking. More than likely that's out there for him.
Absolutely. Now, the Red Sox do have him under contract until 2020. They have one more year of arbitration, which if you don't know, means when the offseason comes up, he gets to say, I'm worth this much. The team gets to say, we think you're worth $10 million. He says, I'm worth 30, and then an arbitrator decides which of those two numbers is more fair, and that's what he gets paid for the last year. So there's a good chance they could pay him $25 million next year as well, because I think he's already making 20.
Yeah.
So it's not that much cheaper, I don't think, to not offer that contract right now. It's just you don't have that long years attached to it.
Jerry, I'm glad you agree with me. Don't believe anything this guy says unless he's talking nice about me.
It's just because you're wearing that hoodie. If I was wearing the Chiefs hoodie, you'd be agreeing with me all day.
Nah, that's not it. It's my face.
Okay, well, I'll let you keep believing that. Moving forward, we'll talk about the Raiders signing Vontaze Burfict to a 1-year, $5 million deal. 28-year-old linebacker on a prove-it deal. I like this move for Oakland, but it makes you kind of wonder. They've got a lot of big personalities in that locker room with Antonio Brown in there as well. Do you see things going out of control in Oakland if they don't get off to a good start, or can John Gruden kind of corral these guys and keep them on track and going in the right direction?
Well, John Gruden is a big personality himself. I mean, there's no doubt about that. He's going to probably be perfectly fine in this. I think he's going to be able to control these guys. I really hope Burfict kind of gets a slap in the face of reality and go, oh, crap. If I don't figure myself out, my career's over with. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's a great player. He's a great run stopper. But he isn't the say-all, be-all of middle linebackers. I mean, at 28 years old, this is one of your time to have one of your biggest contracts ever. I mean, look at C.J. Mosley at 26, 27 years old.
27, I think it is.
And so,
yeah.
I mean, this is a time where it's like you need to prove yourself.
Oh, I agree.
And what about it? This is a defense right here where you can do it. They need run stoppers.
They need a leader, especially is what they need.
And they definitely need a leader, and they need run stoppers because that's what they're going to be drafting for in this draft. With secondary help, they're going to be drafting all over their defense. Let me rephrase myself there. But if he could prove himself, he can maybe get a big contract out of
that's
the Raiders.
That's the next thing I was going to ask you. Do you think signing Burfict can kind of free them up to take an offensive player or two up at the top of the draft? I know they have the 3 first-round picks. They have the round 2 at pick 36, so they got a lot of capital at the top of the draft. Could they go receiver? Could they go tight end even? Because Jared Cook is walking in a free agent?
Tight end's a possibility. With 3 first-round picks, you're looking at Fant, you're looking at Hawkinson. I mean, it's a possibility that one of those guys will fall to him. Even the guy out of Alabama, Irving.
The real question is someone like Hawkinson or Fant, who to me are still leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else in the class. I think it goes Hawkinson at the top, and then Fant one step below him, and then it's still a step or two below with any other tight end in this draft
really,
class.
I actually have him the opposite. I have Fant above Hawkinson, but that's just
the reason I'd say that. I think Fant is a little bit more athletic, but you look at Hawkinson, the way he blocks, which is a commodity in the NFL. Not a lot of these college tight ends block as well anymore. So when you get a guy who can block and is still really dangerous in the passing game, it's hard getting that dual threat guy. That's why I'm going to say Hawkinson's better, even though you're probably right that Fant is a little bit more explosive. You're going to get a little bit more out of him in the receiving game.
They're both built perfectly like tight end should be, but when you look at Fant, he's that kind of guy that just scares you a little bit, where it's like
he's kind of like Evan Ingram.
You're still
if
young.
I had to pick somebody.
Where can that go?
Right.
Where can that body type go? Are you done growing? Are you going to grow a little bit more? But you're right. Both of them are really good. Any team that takes these two guys are going to be happy with what they get out of them.
I totally agree. I think they're, again, head and shoulders above the next best in the tight end class, even though you have Irvine from Alabama in that kind of category as well. I think he's a bit step down.
He's a step down, but he's the third best.
I agree.
Sure.
I agree with you there. The question to me is, are one of those elite guys going to fall to 25, or are we going to see 2 first-round tight ends in this draft? Because normally, tight end is not a really highly drafted position in the first round, but last year we saw a couple guys like Dallas Goedert talked about as a first-round pick. We saw a few others go. We saw O.J. Howard the year before that, so we're starting to see tight end become more important. I think those guys might be off the board before pick 25. I think Oakland might have to trade up if they want to get one of those guys.
Yeah,
because they're not taking them at 4. There's no way you can take them at 4.
No, they're not going to take them at 4. David said Raiders are going old school. Put a bunch of misfits together back in like the 60s and 70s might be dangerous. And I agree with you. I agree with you. Do I think it's this year? No, I don't. I don't think it's this year.
One thing I will say is now, all of a sudden, they're a team that I don't want to play. When you have a guy like Burfict, when you have a guy like Antonio Brown who can break it open, and you have Burfict who's going to be laying these hits on your offensive players that you don't want to see. It just went from, oh, yay, we get to play Oakland Week 17 to we have to play Oakland right before we go into the playoffs.
Let's not forget the main guy, Derek Carr.
Well, Derek Carr as well, as long as he's healthy. I agree with you. And I think it's one of those things that if they stay healthy, I'm not going to say they're a team that beats anyone, but they could be like the Giants this year or even the Dolphins, where somehow they're stealing some wins against people. And again, I wouldn't want to play him in my division with a guy like Vontaze Burfict that knows how to hit guys. You don't want him hitting Patrick Mahomes going into the playoffs or something like that because he's had that dirty reputation pretty much his entire career. You don't want to lose a guy like Mahomes because he took a bad shot in a game that doesn't matter to them in Week 17.
And Jerry said it's off topic, which I don't think it is, Jerry, to be honest with you. That's how he looked at Cleveland this year, as being, a bunch of misfits put together and how dangerous they could be.
I think they've drafted a little bit more than that. They haven't quite relied on free agency as heavily as some other teams have, like Oakland this year. But I think you're right. I think they have brought in a bunch of those guys. They had that really underdog attitude.
You got Odell, who throws tantrums on the sideline.
This year, yeah. But I'm talking about last year going into it. I think that's what he was saying.
Oh, he said
this year. Sorry, I thought you said last year. Okay, this year, yeah, I'll buy that.
You got Hunt, who's kicking women.
Olivier Vernon, who was the only halfway decent pass rusher left in the Giants, and they're like, we don't need you. So, yeah, I mean, this year I'll agree with that. I totally agree. They've kind of made some moves, getting some maligned players and bringing them in, saying we can make it work with them.
Yeah.
So I like that about Cleveland. I like that underdog mentality they still seem to have because, it came out right as soon as they made these moves, and people are like, they're going to the Super Bowl. And then everyone's like, no, not going to happen. So maybe they come in a little bit hungrier. I think that's better to go in with low expectations and kind of overachieve if you're Cleveland. Last thing I think they need is everyone saying, this is a playoff team. This is a Super Bowl team. And then next thing you know, the first 4 weeks you're sitting at 1-3 because nobody's playing hard because they've already accepted they're a playoff team.
Joe says, I was just talking about the Giants and not really rushing to get a quarterback even if Eli has a couple more years in him.
Well, I listened to Dave Gettleman earlier this week where he's like, yeah, I think Eli's fine. You look at the tape, he's great. Let me stop you right there, okay? If you've been watching the same Eli Manning I've been watching for the past 3 or 4 years, I think the priority should 100% be get that next heir apparent. Maybe they don't like the quarterbacks in this class, and maybe that's what it is.
Just about to say, what if they've gone through it and they looked at all the tape and all their scouts?
Well, we already know they don't like Kyler Murray.
And they're going, none of these guys fit what we want for the future.
More than that, do you think it's something where they're looking a little bit further in the books and they say, hey, Justin Herbert's coming out next year, or one of these other guys coming out next year?
Oh, absolutely. I think that. I think that's
who we need to go after.
All teams that are looking for a new quarterback in a couple of years are kind of looking and going, okay, that's our guy.
They'll just be bad until Trevor Lawrence comes out, and they'll get to draft him.
As you like to put it, that it's no team wants to sit there and do bad because you're talking about losing a job.
And that's true.
That's
very true.
But there's no doubting one bit that teams who aren't doing that well, that don't have a future at quarterback right there in the room at this point in time in that organization, you better believe absolutely they're looking towards a future.
Yeah, I think there should be a fire under the Giants still. I think, look, if you come around to the second round or the third round and there's still one of these quarterbacks like a Drew Lock or a Daniel Jones out there, and if you've done any kind of research on this guy and you're like, we can make it work or we can develop him, you need to spend the pick on him. Even if he doesn't work out, you still just boot him out and you go draft a guy the next year. You can never have enough draft picks at quarterback, I don't think. It's one of those positions that you just keep taking one until you hit. I'm okay with that. I'm not saying spend a first round every year, but if one of these guys that seems to be pretty talented, Will Greer's another name in there for this year, if you can take one of those guys,
that's my sleeper quarterback.
That's a developmental guy, and you can park him behind Eli for a year, that I'm more okay with. But you can't go into this draft, not draft anybody, just have Eli Manning and throw away another year and say, we'll get him next time. Yeah. Because you're wasting Saquon Barkley's career, and you basically let everybody else go who's, I've been saying, your career's wasting, like Landon Collins and Odell Beckham. So... look, if the Giants are going to get out of this pit, their division is, even though it's competitive, they can still win it. I feel like if they would have kept the core together and they would have added a little bit to this draft, we could be talking about them winning the NFC East next year. Now I don't feel the same.
Yeah. Jonah wants to know how do we think Bennett is going to fit in with the Pats?
Well, he wants to win, and so do they. I think the Patriots have a history of stomping down.
Patriots want to win?
They do, as it turns out. Right. They have a history of stomping down any kind of big ego and making it work. I mean, they made it work with his brother, Martellus Bennett, so I'm not really too worried about Michael Bennett because I'm sure he's heard from his brother exactly what it's going to be like. Before that move was made, I'm sure he's like, look, here's what you need to expect. Because I guarantee you, if Bennett would have sat there and said, there's no way I'm playing for the Patriots, he would have grenaded this trade.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest with you, man, I would have no fear about how Belichick is going to put Michael Bennett into place where he's going to succeed on that defense. I mean, look what he has done in the years past with literally mediocre players to below average players and made them shine in his defensive scheme. And there's no doubting it. Bennett is talented. You know, to be honest with you, I'm not really a huge Bennett fan. I never liked the guy. Never liked the small shoulder pads. It always kind of drove me nuts staring at it. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't be worried about it. This guy, he's probably going to come close to 10 sacks this year, even at his older age. I think he's gonna find himself in that position to get after the quarterback and make himself, a reason why the Patriots are good again.
How would you rate that replacement? Not to get too off topic, but how would you rate that replacement for Trey Flowers departing for Detroit? I look at this move. I still say it's a downgrade because Michael Bennett's not going to give you the same number of snaps, and he's not as versatile.
It's New England way. They don't spend the money, even doesn't matter how talented
I know, somehow they'll still win a Super Bowl.
And it doesn't make a difference. To be honest with you, it is a downgrade. It's a downgrade. Trey Flowers was their best player on defense. There's no denying that. And he's their best prospect into the future as well. So getting rid of him is a loss. And getting an older veteran, even though he's going to do well for you, he's going to know how football's played in the NFL, it's a downgrade.
Now, Dave says Cleveland will probably be competitive again for the first time since Bernie Kosar. And let me say this. Didn't they make the playoffs with Derek Anderson? I'd say that's competitive. That's a playoff team. I think they only had 9 or 10 wins that season. Don't quote me. But they were competitive. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say they were going to win a Super Bowl that year, but it just depends on your definition of competitive. Do I think they're closer to a Super Bowl now than that year, than 2003 or 2004, whenever that was? Yeah, they're a lot closer now. But I'm not going to sit there and say it's been since Kosar. You got to give them a little more credit than that. All right, Drew, let's move on to our last story here. I'm sure Matthew's been waiting to talk about this. The Vikings signed offensive guard Josh Klein to a 3-year, $15.75 million contract for a guard who had one of the worst years in NFL history, I think, with the Tennessee Titans. He was one of the lowest graded offensive starting linemen in the NFL this year, and they give him $15 million, 7.5 of that guaranteed.
Well, it's a 1-year contract.
It's a 3-year contract.
Well, it's a 1-year contract.
That's true.
It's a 1-year contract. That's where the guaranteed money comes involved. And if he doesn't work out, they cut him, and then they don't lose a whole lot on it. If, it's $15 million, almost $16 million for 3 years. It's not big money. And maybe you can get a starting guard out of it.
Now, he is a liability. One thing he does very well is he shows up. He played every game for the Titans he was available for, started every one of those games. He started a good chunk for the Patriots when he was out there before the Titans acquired him. So you're getting a guy that's going to be reliable, and he's going to be healthy and on the field. But he's a liability in the run game. I can't describe it any other way. He gets pushed back on every play. In 2017 with the Titans, he was a pretty good pass defender. In 2018, he was one of the worst pass defenders in the NFL, like I said. So yeah, this is a risk. But when
that whole line had an issue last year.
He was by far the worst part.
I'm not
he
denying
wasn't playing.
that.
Ben Jones was bad next to him, and believe me, I know everything about this here, Drew. Ben Jones was not good next to him.
I watched it too. I heard you complain about it.
But if you're talking about moves in the second wave of free agency, I still like this pickup for the Vikings because they are desperate for offensive guard help. Yeah. Their offensive line needs help pretty much across the board, in my opinion. I don't look at any one of those guys like he's a 15-year starter, he's a 10-year starter, or they're locked up at that position. Yeah. I look at this move, and I'm going to sit there and say, go draft one, put Josh Klein on the right guard, and just hope for the best. It's still an upgrade over what they had, but incrementally. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say Kirk Cousins is safe now that they signed Josh Klein.
Brian, better late than never, man. Glad you could join us. Well, let's get in to the Elite Eight, the Final Four, and the championship game on our brackets. It's what everyone's here for, right? Or is it all NFL?
Well, we're talking basketball, so I hope you're here for that. Going forward with your picks from last show, obviously we're at the Elite Eight already, Drew. The show has Duke going up against Michigan State, a 1 seed.
In the East bracket, yep.
Absolutely, a 1 seed versus a 2 seed. Not too many upsets. I know everybody kind of made their way through. We still got a 1 versus a 2 in the Elite Eight. Who do you guys see going through here? Because when I look at this matchup, I'm still going to pick Duke. I think Duke is the favorite to win this tournament for a reason. They've got 3 top 5 picks, maybe 6 if you don't like Reddish as much as some of these other guys. But R.J. Barrett's really good. Obviously, Zion's the best player in college basketball right now. Right. They're going to overcome a perennial disappointment like Michigan State. Not disappointment, but they're going to overcome a team like Michigan State that hasn't had the flash, I think, that you want to see for a team that you can say is going to win the national championship.
Right, but this is the toughest matchup Duke has seen all tournament long.
Absolutely.
And Michigan State is not a pushover.
If you want to look at it that way, I was listening to some of the experts talk about it, and they said Virginia Tech is a sleeper to beat Duke and knock them out in the Sweet 16. Look, I think this is the toughest game they're going to have in this bracket, and it might be between them and Virginia Tech, the only 2 teams that can actually challenge them for the East side. Yeah. Really, if these teams drop out early, or if they have busts of games, whatever, Duke is going to cruise on to the Final Four representing the East. I really don't see this. I think this might be the weakest side of the bracket for sure. So when I look at this, I think Duke is going to be just fine in this game as well. I think they're going to win closer than these other games, but I still think they're going to win.
So far, we got 2 votes for Duke. Does anyone out there think Michigan State could possibly get an upset here? I know 1 and 2
Anyone chanting Sparty out there?
1 and 2 isn't a huge upset, but I mean, looking at Duke, any loss at this point in time is big.
And Brian's betting on the starting lineup just like I am. He says they win because of those top 5 picks. I agree. I mean, worst case scenario, you're talking about Cam Reddish being the 6th or the 7th NBA choice off the board. There's really not a whole lot of guys that are better than them. And you got 3 on the same team. I think Duke is going to cruise to a victory in this game. It might be by 7 or 8 points in this one, Drew, instead of 10 to 15 to 20, like some of these other matchups are going to be. But I still see him winning, and I still see him winning comfortably.
I do got one question while we're waiting on a little bit more votes, even though it looks like Duke's going to win. Do they ever, at some point in time, rest Zion?
No.
Okay.
If I'm Coach K, there's absolutely no reason I'm resting this guy because I have him for, if I get to the Elite 8, I have him for another 3 games. And that's it, because we all know he's going to the NBA. We all know R.J. Barrett is gone. We all know Cam Reddish is. So they're going to be playing. I'm going to milk every minute out of these guys I'm going to get before this tournament is over because he knows they're moving on. And I'm not going to sit there and say Coach K is a bad guy for doing that. I'm not trying to imply that. But you got to look at it. He only has these guys for another couple games. Resting them does not help Duke basketball. Resting them might help them in their career, but it does not help them in Duke basketball, and that ultimately is what he's worried about.
What's going on, Shay? Glad you can join us. All right, Duke took it going to the Final Four. In our West bracket, we have Gonzaga and Michigan, another number 1 and number 2 seed going against each other.
Really quick, Matthew wants to talk Vikings again. I know he missed our Josh Klein little spiel there, talking about them signing him, but he says he's happy they re-signed Dan Bailey. Yes, if you can secure that kicking position, I'm sure the last thing the Vikings want is another missed field goal in a playoff game. I like Dan Bailey going back. I think he's a good pickup for them. And to me, kicker is one of the most important positions nobody ever talks about because it's never important until you don't have one.
Or you miss a field goal and you're
just ask Chicago.
Yeah, you're about to crucify somebody. So real quick, guys, Gonzaga versus Michigan. Throw your votes in there. Let us know what you think is going to go to the Final Four out of the West bracket.
I like Gonzaga, but I had them losing to Marquette in the last round. I still think it's going to be a close game. That's not one I feel good about either way. I like those 2 teams. They're both very complete teams. They both play really good team basketball, and I think Gonzaga is deeper than a team like Duke. But, again, when you're talking about who they're playing in Michigan, Michigan plays really good defense. They've got those big wingers as well. Do you think Michigan can upset them with that defense, or does offense still win in college basketball?
Gonzaga has a tough road. And it blows my mind that they have the highest percentage getting to the Final Four. But when I look at their matchups, I mean, either Syracuse or Baylor, I think is going to give them a tough matchup. Of course, I see Marquette beating Florida State or Vermont, who's ever come out.
But even if it's Florida State's a tough matchup.
It absolutely is. Gonzaga does not have an easy road at all to the Final Four. Now they're facing Michigan. And let's not ignore Michigan. They were in the final last year, in the championship last year. They had all possibility to win national championship. Let's not ignore how great this team was in the past and still could be.
I think that was Michigan State, wasn't it?
Was it Michigan State?
Yeah, it was Michigan State in the final versus Villanova.
That's one of the Michigans.
There was a Michigan team in the final.
That's all that matters.
But that's okay.
My
Drew.
bad.
Look, they're still a good team. They were a disappointment, I think.
What's up, Rob?
They were a little bit of a disappointment last year because they did bounce out, but we've been saying that about them. Big defense, big wingers. They're really good. They're really physical. They can do what they need to play defense, but I just don't think they have the scores to match up with Gonzaga. If this is the matchup you're putting in front of me, I'm going to take Gonzaga to move on to the Final Four. I don't know about you guys, but I just don't think Michigan's going to have the offense to keep up with either Marquette or Gonzaga, whoever you have going in there.
At this point in time, Michigan is taking it.
All right, well, obviously we believe in defense.
Michigan.
Defense wins championships, even in the NCAA. Isn't that right?
Michigan took it.
Moving on to our next matchup, we have Virginia versus Purdue for you guys. Now, I had Virginia bouncing out to Kansas State. I also had Tennessee beating Purdue. So I have a totally different matchup than you guys here. Purdue with that dominant offense. They're really flashy. They could be top 5. They get really, really hot on offense. Going up against Virginia, who I think everybody agrees is one of those scary teams because they lost to the 16. Are we putting too much weight on one game from last year?
But it's that much weight.
And they did lose.
It's that much weight.
They did lose some bad games this year, too.
They did, but it's that much weight. You're not...
It's important enough?
Well, as a number 1 seed losing to a 16 seed, yeah, it's huge. It's only happened once, and it happened to them, and it was last year. You better believe that makes all the difference in the world. That being said, I think Purdue can do an upset.
I like offense. I like offense in the tournaments. I like consistent offense, which I don't think Purdue has, but when they get streaky hot, they can beat anybody. And again, I've said it before, I think Virginia is the team that if you're going to pick a 1 seed to trip up early in the tournament, I like them to lose. I think they're the most vulnerable of the 1 seeds, so I don't hate you guys picking Purdue if that's where you want to go there. I think I'd go that direction too. I'd pick the upset in this one.
At this point in time, guys, we're voting for Virginia or Purdue out of the Elite Eight. Who do you think is going to reach the Final Four? Go ahead and put your vote in. Let us know so we can go ahead and move on to the next bracket.
The only other thing I want to say here, going back to my matchup with Kansas State versus Tennessee, I see that as a much better game. I see that as a closer game. I think both of those teams have the talent to upset these other guys because Purdue, like I said, they have the explosive offense. They're really good on the offensive side of the ball sometimes. It's just not all the time. I like to go with consistency in these tournaments. I want to see teams that are consistently good at offense, consistently making threes, and then playing some good defense as well. I really just don't see Purdue with the defensive capability to keep up with some of these guys. And if that offense turns off, I think they're totally susceptible to getting knocked off. I don't see them winning multiple games just on fire.
Yeah, I'm huge on Kansas State this year. I think I have them in my Final Four in my bracket. I definitely believe that they're a scary team this year, and I do believe that's who's going to knock off Virginia. So it looks like we got...
Josh is saying Virginia, and he's saying they take it no matter who the matchup is. If it's Purdue, he thinks they beat the brakes off them, and he's saying he squeaks out Tennessee if they make it. Josh, I'm with you. I think Tennessee gets in there, but I think Tennessee's an even better team than Virginia. I really do. Tennessee doesn't have as bad of losses, even though they have not been as hot towards the end of the season. I think if Tennessee plays their best ball here, they're going to beat Virginia. I like Virginia as a team, but again, I don't think they're as good as some of these other 1 seeds, and I definitely see them probably being upset when you're talking about going on to the Final Four. And then we've got Jerry with Purdue, Rob also with Purdue, and Brian says motivation Virginia over Purdue, so we are tied still. Matty Ice is asking, what do we think about UB? If we're talking about Buffalo, I like them. I have them going into the Sweet 16 and losing to Michigan, but the show had them bouncing out, I believe, in the first round, maybe the second. They're not as high on Buffalo as I am. The best thing I can say about Buffalo is they have a great coach in Nate Oates.
I got 3. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I got 3-2 on Purdue. So right now Purdue is the one that is winning.
Just really quick, let me finish up with the Buffalo thing.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Nate Oates, I think, is the best thing about that team, and he's the head coach. Usually, head coaches aren't scoring any points out there and anything, so that's kind of an issue. But when you talk about the consistency that he's had, the deep run they had last year, I like them to win a couple games this year before they bounce out, and then I think Nate Oates will probably be on to a bigger and better coaching job. I hate it for all the Buffalo fans out there, but when you have this good of a guy and you're a small school, he's going to get an offer from one of the big schools to steal him away.
Josh wants to know who were the big losses for Virginia.
Off the top of my head, they've lost to Duke a couple times. They lost to Florida State. Though? Well, no, but you'd like to see a number 1 seed beat someone like Duke, or at least hang in there. They pretty much got the brakes beat off them every time they played them. And then they lost in the SEC or in the ACC tournament to Florida State that beat them? Was it Florida State that upset them in there?
I believe so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they had a couple other losses. I think they lost, 4, 5, 6 games this year? They were all the way down at like the 10 seed or something. And I've been singing their praises for a while, but again, I don't have their schedule in front of me, but they do have bad losses. I really don't like Virginia in this tournament if you want to talk about the number 1 seeds. And I was sitting there saying it's not as bad. I was saying the other way a couple shows ago saying they're not bouncing out of the first round. They're not losing one early like everyone was sitting there saying because they lost last year to a 16 seed. But they're not as good as Gonzaga. They're not as good as Duke. You can't tell me they're going to beat a team like Duke that manhandled them in the ACC this year.
I'm with you on that one. And it looks like we're going a vote 3-2. Purdue is going to beat Virginia, going to Final Four.
Also, David saying, thank God Simeon got traded from the Vikings. Look, I saw that, but I didn't think it was big enough news to talk about. So we're going to brush by that one. And we have Purdue escaping Virginia. I think that's the right move. I have them losing a round earlier, but again, I think that's totally reasonable. I don't see any reason why you can't sit there and say Virginia might be in it and might even get through that round, but I just don't think so.
All right, Midwest bracket. We got the number 1 seed, North Carolina, going against the number 3 seed, Houston.
I didn't like the Houston over Kentucky pick. I think that's going to be a good game, but I don't think Houston's got the firepower to beat a team like Kentucky that's really finding its stride towards the end of the season. I know they bombed out in the SEC tournament against Tennessee, but if they didn't have a few fouls called against them in that game, I mean, they were about 10 points up leading through most of the second half in that game. I think we'd be talking about them being a 1 seed again, having won the the SEC tournament and beating Auburn in the final. So, again, I'm not crazy about Houston being in this matchup, but since they are, and I have to pick Houston versus North Carolina, you got to go with the team that lost to Duke by 1 point and then beat them twice without Zion.
Absolutely. And while you guys are voting for North Carolina versus Houston, Brian says, is there time, or we might have missed the Clay Matthews to Rams deal? He says he wants to be football heavy.
We didn't talk about him as much. We talked about him in a little bit of a regular post today. Drew, while we're waiting on these votes to come in, how do you feel about Clay Matthews going to the Rams? Because I like it, but then again, the Rams are stacking up on a lot of veterans here, and usually guys that are in their mid-30s can kind of get hurt in the NFL. Do you see them being depleted on defense when guys like Eric Weddle and Clay Matthews get hurt?
I mean, my question is, how much does he have left? I mean, he was a Green Bay favorite. They love him up in Green Bay, and they let him walk. So I mean, what kind of player do you get? I mean, he relied on speed. He's not fast anymore. He's not an overly strong guy that can power through the offensive line. I'm not saying the guy's weak, just kind of putting it out there. I mean, I like the move. It's probably the right thing for them because it's a little bit of a cheaper contract. But does he make the difference where now they're beating the Patriots in the Super Bowl? I don't know. I don't know if that's what makes the Rams a better team because of him. When I look at Eric Weddle, I like that because you're talking about a quarterback in the backfield that can direct the defense. But Clay Matthews in the trenches, he's in there trying to push his way through him. He's never been a great run stopper. He's all about getting at the quarterback. So what does he bring to this team?
Look, I think he brings an edge rush at least 30 or 40% of the snaps this year on defense. I think he's one of those guys that you're going to see rotationally shift in. But if you look at the weaknesses of the Rams last year, it was definitely defensive end. They were set in the middle with Sue and Donald, even though Sue didn't have his best year. And then you go and look at the way the defensive ends play. Teams were running on the outside too much on the Rams. I think they're trying to address that. I like Clay Matthews coming in as a rotational guy. I don't think he solves all their problems, and I think they know that. That you might even see them draft somebody in the first round this year to try to address that as well. But you're bringing on a savvy guy who's been in the NFL. He knows how to make things happen. And if you only keep him in there and keep him fresh for a lot of snaps, you might see some impact plays and get 5, 6, 7 sacks out of this guy.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Rob said they did the same thing to Reggie White and Brett Favre. I'll never say anything negative about Reggie White ever in my entire life. So whatever Reggie White brought to any team, it was the best he possibly could. But when you talk about Brett Favre going to the Jets and the Vikings, how can you sit there and go, well, he was a better option over Aaron Rodgers? When you have that better option right there staring at you in the face, how do you keep Brett Favre there? You just don't. You move on with it, and you put Aaron Rodgers as a starter, and obviously it was the right decision. They won a Super Bowl.
Absolutely, and you really, I mean, when you have a guy like that and you're sure of it, I think the Chiefs did the same thing with Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. Sometimes you just got to play aggressive. You go with the younger guy instead, and look at both of those kind of case studies. It's worked out. When you've got that guy waiting in the wings that's ready to go and you watch him in practice and you're like, this guy can play, you need to put him on the field, even if that means separating with a legend like Brett Favre or a good player like Alex Smith.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle's saying Clay's going to be a great fit. He's not going to have a problem at all fitting in there. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he's not going to fit. He's going to fit great in that defense. And he's going to find all the time to play as much as he can stay healthy. My question is, what does he bring? What does he bring to this team? Does he make it a better team because he's there? And that's where I'm kind of going, I think he's just kind of just a role player at this point. Maybe it would have been better to draft a young defensive end or an outside linebacker that can rush a quarterback instead of signing a veteran like Clay Matthews.
I'm seeing Houston here, Drew. Do you see anyone else? I see 2-1 Houston. Actually, 2-2.
I at this point, I thought I saw 2-2.
Well, go ahead and settle the tie in the comments below if you want to pick one of these teams to move on.
Sharif's in there. Sharif, North Carolina or Houston? Who's going to win it? Go to the Final Four, man. I'm glad you could join us, by the way.
Absolutely. When you talk about the Tar Heels, I really don't see them losing this game. If this is Kentucky, maybe I can understand it. But again, you're talking about a team that barely lost to Duke in the last couple seconds of the ACC tournament, even with Zion, because that was the big talk, right? During the season, it was all about, well, they didn't have Zion. That's why they got blown out on the road. They didn't have Zion. That's why they got blown out at home. But even with Zion, it was a one-point game. It came down to the final minute. You want to tell me that you can't have a reverse of that kind of situation where North Carolina comes away 1 point ahead because of a possession?
It's a possibility. Kyle says they get a beautiful edge rusher. I guess that blonde flowing hair. Maybe you got something about that.
Yeah, maybe I need to start growing this back out.
And it looks like Houston is going to take the win over North Carolina. I think this is a big upset because I see North Carolina in the championship
Only
game.
2 losses for Houston during the regular season. I mean, they were very consistent. I get it. They weren't playing the same caliber of opponents as teams like UNC and some others. But I don't think there's any reason why you can't sit there and say they're not going to be a dangerous team in this tournament. I don't hate it for the upset. I don't have them getting past Kentucky, but you guys have them going Final Four. It'll be fun to watch.
All right, Final Four.
So who does that leave for the show? Duke versus Michigan.
Duke versus Michigan. Who is going to the national championship? Guys, go ahead and vote. Let us know who you think. Jake, what do you got on this matchup?
Well, like we said, Duke's got that stacked roster, but Michigan has a great defense that maybe can slow some of these guys down. The problem is Duke is physical as well. Guys like Zion know how to drive to the basket and make stuff happen inside the arc. And then you got guys like Reddish and Barrett as well on top of it. I obviously have to pick Duke here. I think Michigan's kind of a slower team, especially offensively. They're not going to be putting up as many points as Duke can, and I think it's just tough for them to go toe-to-toe with a team like that. Do you think defense can outweigh 3 great players on Duke?
I got one word for you. Zion.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be the number 1 pick, right? I don't think anyone out there is saying Zion is not going to be the number 1 pick.
To be honest with you, I think he's not going to see as much time in the early rounds. I know that you say no, that's not going to happen. They're going to play him as much as possible. I think they're going to try to rest him a little bit. Let's not ignore the fact that he did get hurt. Yeah, it wasn't a major injury, but I guarantee you his knee is still tender. That's going to be until probably a year from now or a year from that injury that knee's going to bother him. So we're talking about hard basketball. We're talking about a lot of minutes that you want your best player out there on the field. And now finally, in my opinion, he's out there. He's against one of the best teams in the nation with Michigan. This is the time where this guy's going to shine. He's going to show exactly what it's all about. He's not splitting any other time with other games going on. Everyone is focusing on him. At this point in time, he's going to show why he is the best player in college basketball, and this is where Duke's going to win.
And Jerry's saying he's going to smash a backboard before they finish this. I like that idea. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see him be like Shaq and just pull the entire rim down. You know, I think that would be fun to watch. But again, obviously the schools I think are rooting against that. Either way, this matchup, I think you look at it, I think there's no way I can go with anyone but Duke. I had Duke versus Marquette, and I see Marquette as a more complete team that can probably give them a better game than Michigan can because I like Michigan, but they're a defensive team, and at the end of the day, you got to score points to beat a team like Duke with all this star power. I don't think they're going to have the firepower to keep up with them. I think Marquette keeps it closer, but I also have Duke sweeping by them to go into the national championship.
All right. Josh says Michigan has a great defense, but won't be able to put up points with Duke.
I agree with you there, Josh. Absolutely.
This is a matchup that Duke will beat them by 15 plus, and Zion will have a monster game. I'm agreeing with you on that.
And you can't out-physical a guy like Zion. It's just not going to happen in the NCAA. I really don't see anyone on Michigan having that athleticism and that kind of freak size or strength to really keep up with a guy like this. He's going to beat him to the rim, and he's going to do it enough that Duke wins this one comfortably if this is the matchup. I want to see Marquette that's a little bit more of a chippy team that can put up more points on the board than Michigan, that can pass the ball around, and it doesn't have to be about one specific guy. Not that Michigan's about one specific guy, but right. I want to see a team that can have 4, 5, 6 guys really step up and make big plays in this. I don't see Michigan as that team.
At this point in time, Josh, I'm going to go ahead and say that you're saying Duke, so we're 2-2 on this game. David has a great point, and it's absolutely right on the fact that I wanted to say. David goes, Duke's outside shooting is kind of weak, but they're tough in the paint. Zion's a beast. If they get to the championship and if they win the national championship, Duke will be the worst three-point shooting team ever to win a national championship. It is an issue with them.
I know the league, both the NBA and college basketball, is starting to gravitate toward the three, and when you're consistently hitting it, it's great, but I still think if you can get those high percentage shots and you can just jam it in every time that you want to, there's no reason not to do it. Take the sure points. Don't take the roll of the dice, because I love three shooting teams, but if you can drive in like Zion can, there's no reason you can't make all those points from inside the arc. I have no problem with that. I get it. They're not shooting threes like other teams are, but Duke is still a threat almost every time they get inside.
Even when they're shooting, they're not doing well at it.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you can win games still from inside the arc, even in the NBA, even in college basketball, but you just have to be that much better at it than every other team.
Hey,
and
guys,
I think Duke might be.
Hey, guys, remember, let's vote. What do we got? We got Duke and Michigan trying to go to the national championship. It's 2-2. Get your votes in. Let us know who wins out of this matchup.
Kyle also says Zion in the NBA. He's waiting for it. I agree, man. I think he's going to wind up on the Knicks or the Bulls. I think the NBA, look, I'm going to say it. I've always said it. I think the NBA is rigged. I really do. When you talk about Cleveland getting that, 0.1% chance to get a first-round pick, and they did, or get the first overall pick, and they did, I think the NBA is definitely rigged on that. It's the third most corrupt, I think, sports enterprise behind the NCAA and FIFA. I think you're going to see someone like the Knicks or the Bulls going to get this guy. You're not going to see him go out to Phoenix. Let me just say that. You're not going to see Zion playing in that Purple Suns jersey.
Kyle says, let's talk about Chiefs free agency. Man, I'd talk about Chiefs all day if my boss would let me.
Who's your boss?
I don't know.
I want to hear you say
I said this. Whatever this is.
Going back to this also.
Is my wife in the room?
Sharif says the only way Michigan wins is to collapse the paint and make Duke shoot threes and the mid-range. But look, I don't think you can collapse the paint enough to stop a guy like Zion. I really don't. I get it. That's going to be the game plan. I think everybody knows that, but everybody has known that probably since at least mid-season when they've seen this guy go crazy. So there's really no way they're going to be able to do it. I don't think Michigan, as defensively good as they are going to be able to keep them away from the rims. They're too dominant at Duke. They're too good at getting inside, and they're just going to outmuscle a team like Michigan.
Guys, if no one else is going to vote, I think we're going to move Duke forward. I think it's a favorite in this matchup. I know that it's 2-2, but no one else is voting. And if you guys aren't going to vote, I'm going to be the tiebreaker, and I'm going to go Duke. If you don't like that and you see Michigan winning, you better put it down right now, or else I'm going to pick
Yeah, here's
Duke.
your chance to decide history. You guys, you got the perfect bracket going right now. Finish it out and let us know which team actually is going to win, because we don't know. I mean, not that anybody does, but we don't know.
Oh, I know.
He's got his crystal ball out. Let's move forward here, Drew. Let's talk about our last matchup for the Final Four. Purdue and Houston for the show. I don't have either one of those teams getting there. I have Tennessee versus North Carolina, and I have UNC taking the championship here. So I'm not sure where to go. Again, explosive offense versus a team that's been very good on both sides of the ball in Houston, just at a lower level and playing teams that aren't quite the same caliber as a team like Purdue. Do you really see Purdue manhandling them, or does the magic kind of run out in this kind of scenario?
If this bracket comes true, what it is that Houston got this far as their offense. This is a team that can put up 90 points without any problems, and this is where, this is what they'll do. And if they've gotten this far, I don't see a team like Purdue stopping them, and I would see them in the national championship. Of course, I don't have these two teams either.
Yeah.
But if Houston is there, I think that's the reason why. And by the way, guys, Duke is going to the national championship on this bracket.
And thank you, David, for settling the tie, man. We appreciate that. Also, Brian saying double Zion. Look, you could triple Zion, and then they're going to go dish it to either Barrett or Reddish out there, and they're going to make things happen. I think when you talk about Duke, they've got enough playmakers, and they have enough guys that are just so much physically better than all these other kids in the NCAA that there's no stopping them. I really think it's going to take a very bad game out of Duke. Somebody's going to have to be way off for them to lose. And they take all the easy shots. They get inside and they score. So it's going to take a heck of a defensive performance to keep them out of the paint. That's all I can say.
It's going to be rough.
Like, someone's going to have to play their best game of the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go to the other side. Drew, we're talking Purdue-Houston still. I like Purdue if I had to pick one of these two teams. The reason I'm going to say that is we've already said they're going to be hot through all these games. I say, why not one more? Why not beat a team like Houston that has not matched up against and doesn't have as high profile of wins as a team like Purdue does? I think Purdue is going to be able to play, and because they've been groomed, because they played these better games during the season, they're going to be more ready for this moment. That offense, if we have it going clicking to this point, I say keep betting on it and keep them going into the national championship.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I mean, they're right on the head. Talk about a team that has a deeper schedule that's against better players. It'd be Purdue, but
I see 4 Houston picks. I don't see anyone going with Purdue. So
it's definitely going to be
Houston
Houston
is carrying the day.
Point.
Also, Eric says Zion to Phoenix. I think the NBA will be rolling in their grave to see him go somewhere like that. They need him. I'll agree with you there. If you want to get a small market team like Phoenix back on track, getting the number 1 pick would be great. But when you've got teams that are storied like the NBA or like the Bulls in the NBA and the Knicks, I just think it's rigged, man. I think they're going to sit there. I don't care what the odds are. I think the NBA is going to magically reach in there, and you're really talking about Chicago or the Knicks getting this guy.
It's more unlikely.
What are the odds he goes to the Lakers?
Guys, Houston has now made it to the national championship game. We got Duke and Houston. Go ahead and get your votes in, guys. Who do you think's going to win? Duke with Zion leading the way, or that high-flying offense that Houston has?
Absolutely, guys. It's not the pick I would have had going with Houston, but you're talking about a 3 seed making the final for the entire tournament. I don't think it's that far-fetched. Again, I've been singing Houston's praises up to this point. I know Sharif's saying their coach is going to fold and everything like that, but if you're going to go with somebody, if you're going to pick a sleeper to make the national championship, I don't see a problem with going with a team like Houston. I like the way they've played through this year. When you're talking about a matchup against Duke, though, Drew, do they have any shot? I would rather see the hot team like Purdue go in there with a great offense and just outshoot them. That's what I would rather see.
To be honest, I'd love to see this matchup. We need another beer. This has gone long
Absolutely.
enough. Getting parched.
Shout out to Drew for the great idea to keep extra beers ready because we've been running out here lately. But going back to this national championship game between Duke and Houston, if I had to pick one, I have UNC versus Duke again. Maybe it's because my heart wants to see it. Maybe it's because it's the matchup that I want to see rather than the one I think is going to happen. But if it's Houston versus Duke, and I'm looking at this, I think Houston doesn't really stand much of a chance. Again, just like some of these other teams. I think Michigan's the better matchup. I think when you talk about Michigan State, I think they probably have just about as much of a chance of beating Duke as Houston does. I can't pick them. Can anyone else?
Does anyone ever really match up with Duke in the paint? But if any team doesn't match up with Duke in the paint, it's Houston. Oh man,
I don't know. I really don't see Purdue really shutting Duke down inside either. I'm not going to say that.
Well, I'm just saying in the sense of, I mean, if Duke's going to win, like they win every game, it's in the paint more than likely because their three-point shooting is absolutely horrible.
And I don't see that changing. They're going to play good defense against a team like Houston, though. It's going to be on the biggest stage. So, again, they've played these games. Everybody's been watching Duke play. Like when Duke played UNC, everybody was watching that. There's not a single game you can point to with Houston, I think, where you could say the entire nation was watching Houston play on that stage. I think playing in the lower division hurts them at this point, and to reach a stage like that is a great accomplishment for Houston, but there's no way they walk away with the win. Not in my opinion. I think you got to pick Duke to win this one.
Sharif says he's drinking Miller High Life in honor of this show, drinking the champagne of beers, man.
I like the High Life, man. It's one of my favorite non-Yingling or PBR beers that we usually don't bring to the show.
Yingling-a-ding.
Right, exactly. All that stuff you brew upstairs.
And PB Drews, yeah. I don't know what you're talking about.
Also, Kyle has Duke winning this one by 12. I think Duke wins this one by 20, to be honest with you. I really don't see Houston as a tough enough matchup against them. They're not that elite defense like Michigan. They're not that elite offense either like Purdue can be when they're firing on all cylinders or any of these other teams in the bracket. I think if they make it there, it's an honor just to get smacked down by Duke. Really. It would help the program out immensely. I think it'd be great for years to come because you'd be able to recruit saying, look, we've been to the national championship. There's no reason you can't come play for Houston, especially if they can lock down their coach at that point. If I'm the AD of Houston, that is my first move. If we make the national championship, we're signing a 5-year deal with our head coach. I mean, it's just what has to be.
Oh, absolutely. Guys, it looks like Duke is taking it in the show's bracket. We got Duke winning it all against Houston. Man, what a crazy bracket. What a bunch of upsets. One side, it finally cleared itself out, and the other side, it kind of kept going.
Absolutely, man. I totally agree. Jerry agrees, too. He says Duke blows Houston out of the water. Look, man, it's tough. I have UNC upsetting Duke because I want to see it, and that's it. I'm rooting for the story, man. I guess that's the way I want to go here, but they lost by 1 point in the conference tournament. They're going to be sore about it. There's going to be all this talk about, Duke beat them when Zion was back. That's great. They beat them by 1 point in the final couple minutes. It came down to the last couple possessions. I think UNC, if they do match up with Duke in this, can upset them because the expectation is not going to be on them to win. The expectation is all going to be on Duke.
Yep. All right, Brian says James Harden is going to show up in the game prep and talk to Houston and teach the perimeter shooters how to push off and step back.
It doesn't fly in college like it does in the pros. I mean, you don't get to take 14 steps back in that little step back jumper like he does. So
and Sharif says, no, not Samson for the extension. He is not about that, coach.
Sharif, listen, I don't care what happens. If he takes Houston to the national championship, you're extending this man, okay?
Yeah,
because he is going to have the best 2 to 3 years.
You're at least going to try to.
He is going to have the best 2 to 3 years worth of recruiting that Houston has ever seen. He's going to be able to go into every house, sit down with the parents and say, I brought my kids from the past couple of years to the national championship. That's why your son's going to Houston. Because we're going to bully everybody else, and because we're going to make a deep run in the tournament. And short of them falling short, this is how you get a program on track. That's the best thing that could happen to Houston.
Ken says Duke is going to get it done. There's a lot of people saying he's going to get it done. So I say Zion's going to get it done. Don't get me wrong, Barrett. And
he's only going to be like the second or third pick of the NBA. He ain't that good.
and Reddish is good, but Zion is the guy that's going to make this team win a national championship, my opinion.
He's the leader, and obviously we saw them hurt without him, especially going up against teams like the Tar Heels. So we'll see. I have Duke also going to the finals, but the tournament's a weird place, Drew.
Last question for you.
Go ahead.
What brand of shoe is Zion going to be wearing?
He's still in those Nikes. I think he's in different ones. I think they gave him like Kyrie's or something like that to make up for it. Look, I'm not a big shoe guy. I think it's pretty dumb, to be honest with you. But, I mean, it's pretty obvious he's going to be making a lot of money from Nike as soon, or anyone else, whether it's Under Armour, Adidas, whoever can land this guy on his deal, as soon as he gets to the NBA. As soon as he's allowed to start making money for himself using his own image, he's about to make $200 million in one of these contracts here, Drew. So
no doubt about it.
I don't think it matters in college. I think it matters as soon as he leaves.
Thank you, Eric. All right, real quick. We will be getting this bracket out for you guys so you guys can all see your picks. Remember, this is all your guys' votes. If this bracket makes it and it gets the best bracket of all time, all the credit goes to you guys 100%. Kyle, let's go ahead and talk Chiefs free agency just so we can make you happy, because I'll do it too and it makes me happy. Where do you want to start, man? I mean, are you talking about the losses that we got? Is it? We talked a little bit about this game. I love the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs are getting so much hype about how they're not going to be any good. How can you take all that loss in talent and leadership in the defense and expect to still be good? Well, the question is, or the thing is, we weren't that good last year at all anyways.
Especially on defense. Yeah,
and that's what I'm talking about.
Only on defense. Obviously, you can't sit there and say they were good on offense.
So maybe losing that stuff and adding this addition of different talent, young talent, in a sense of, Tyrann Mathieu over Eric Berry. I think, in my opinion, it's still kind of all up in the air. It's what does Spagnuolo do with this defense? Is it change over from the 3 to 4 to 4 to 3? Is that what makes a difference? Does Breland coming in as a starting role next to Fuller, does that help secure that secondary? Because that was definitely an issue. Even though we gave up a lot of yards on the ground, our secondary is where we lost these games.
Well, that's very true, and I feel like if you look at the focus, that's totally what they've been building on here in free agency. You brought in a guy like Breland, you brought in Tyrann Mathieu. They're obviously focused on bringing in as much young talent and guys that can make an impact in the back half of the secondary. I like building front to back. And that's what they did last year. They weren't very good. Obviously, they had one of the most depleted secondaries out of the game with guys like Eric Berry going out. The rest, they could never really find an answer at second corner, especially into the depth as well. I would have liked to see those additions, and then you keep a guy like Justin Houston, or you keep like D Ford on this team to help the pass rush. And I get it, D Ford only had one good year. I'm not going to sit there and say he's the best pass rusher in the world, but it's a lot of change for a defense that already was not very good.
One thing that we do all got to remember is Justin Houston and Eric Berry are still out there in free agency. They're not gone. I mean, there's a possibility they do come back and sign for a smaller contract. I mean,
I think Eric Berry is a very good chance.
And at this point in time,
we're already paying them. I think it'll be a frosty Friday in hell when Justin Houston comes back.
We're already paying these guys regardless. So it is a possibility they do come back. But we just got to see what the market is out for them. But, to be honest with you, it's all depending on Tyreek Hill. I mean, this is exactly what you said. If Tyreek Hill does get in trouble, does that affect their offense?
Big time.
And I think it does as well. I think we're talking 3 to 4 games on the losing bracket is what's going to add to that.
And I love Travis Kelce. I took him in the second round in a lot of my fantasy leagues this year. I love Travis Kelce. I think he's one of the best. I think he is the best tight end in football, actually, right now. When you look at the way Gronk has regressed, I think Travis Kelce is the man at tight end, even over Zach Ertz, who
I'd say Ertz would be the only one that would match up to him.
Fantasy-wise, sure. But when you talk about a blocker, I'd rather have Kelce. Going into the Chiefs, just really quick before I move into some of these other comments here, I think the Chiefs are kind of lost in the defense right now. They're changing things up. They're moving to a 43, like you said. So they're kind of shifting everything. They're shifting everything right now, and they're trying to build the back end, which it doesn't matter what defense you're going to run. You still need 2 corners. You still need 2 safeties, and then you need depth behind that, guys who can guard the slot.
You need a diamond quarterback.
Exactly.
And a nickel.
And that's what they tried to address. So we may see them go lean heavy on that in the draft and just say, it'll be okay. We'll deal with whatever else comes. But I don't like to see all these subtractions. Not for a team that was so close to making the Super Bowl, because usually when you have this much change, bad things tend to happen. And you're right. They weren't very good last year, but they made some impact plays. And you were the one telling me about this all the time. Even though the defense was ranked really low, you had guys that would step up and make the one play and shut somebody down and take the rest of the game out of it.
Absolutely.
So I think they're subtracting those guys.
And that being said, I'm with Sharif. The Chiefs will be fine. He's got them at 11-5. I'm not going to say any record because let's see what happens with Hill first.
Absolutely. And I don't want to talk record until we get after the draft. Because, again, that can change up a lot of stuff. Usually you don't get a ton of starters, but once in a while you hit on a bunch of these draft picks, or somebody has a great draft class like Indianapolis, and you see everything change.
Or the Saints 2 years before.
Or the Saints, exactly. So I don't want to go into too many records here, but I agree with you. I think the Saints will be fine as long as they have that offense going because that was their strength.
Yep.
Also, really quick before we get out of here, it was somebody, Eric, says, who do we think the Cardinals are going to take with the number 1 pick? I've been harping on this for a couple weeks now since I saw them sign the outside linebacker from the Ravens, Terrell Suggs. They're not going to go draft Nick Bosa. Either they're going inside with Quinnen Williams, or more than likely they're drafting the quarterback Kyler Murray. More proof to that. Number 1, they said Josh Rosen is our quarterback, quote-unquote, for now. Go introduce your wife as my wife for now and see how she feels about it. Josh Rosen should feel the exact same way. I don't think they're married to this guy at all. And I think they're going to go make a change and draft Kyler Murray this year. Another great point, when they went to his pro day, they checked him out at his pro day, or they skipped his pro day and instead went to a private session at Oklahoma, whereas usually when you go for these kind of private sessions, you bring them into your facility. It shows me they're incredibly interested in this kid. They're going with quarterback number 1. And I think the biggest beneficiary of that is Oakland, because they're going to get one of those top 3 defenders in Josh Allen, and I know I'm rambling on here, Quinnen Williams, or Joey Bosa. They're going to get one of those 3 guys because Arizona's going to go take a quarterback.
Yeah, to be honest, at this point in time, Kyler Murray is the number 1 pick in the NFL draft.
Rob still has Michigan making it past Duke, but
and by the way, just to remind you guys, we will be at the draft. We will be there. We'll do some kind of live appearance at some point in time. Of course, it won't be on national television. They don't care about what we say, but we're
gonna photobomb ESPN.
We're gonna do it on our show. I hope you guys can join us. We're excited that it's in Nashville, and we can't wait to see you guys there.
Absolutely, it's going to be fun. Brian, just really one or two more comments before we get out of here because everybody wants to talk about different stuff. Brian says he's never liked the 34. It needs specialized and fast linebackers. He's asking too much of the back end and harder to apply pressure without blitzing. That's the whole point of it. You want the blitzers. Yeah. I think the 34 is the better defense if you can get the personnel. The problem is, it's really tough getting that personnel.
How many times did I complain about Justin Houston going back in coverage?
Well, that was just a bad decision.
No,
that's just a bad decision.
He's exactly nailing what it is. They're asking for linebackers to jump back in to coverage.
A lot of it's scheme. Look at the Titans.
I'm just saying.
Derek Morgan does not cover very well, or Brian Arakpo didn't cover very well. And guess what we rarely saw the Titans do? Drop either of those guys in coverage. They were going forward on every play. So I get what you're saying. It takes very versatile players. I think a lot of it's game plan. You got to be smart enough to say, Justin Houston doesn't cover very well, but he's pretty good at getting after the quarterback. Guess what he's doing almost every play? And they did that for years.
Yeah,
they did.
They did.
Then they tried. They got a little too smart for themselves. They outthought themselves and said, "What if we try to drop him back? No one will be expecting."
It was too often did they try to outsmart themselves. I'm just saying.
I agree, but that can totally happen.
It was disgusting. I to be honest, the move from 3 to 4 to 4 to 3, I'm excited about it. I think it's the right move at this point in time, and I'm right there with you, Brian. I've never been a fan of the 3-4 either.
I like the 34. I think it's the best because you can trick offensive lines. It makes it hell on them to try to track who they need to block and where it is. You can get a lot of unprotected blitzes, but I'll agree with you that it takes very specialized personnel to get, and it's tough to get that. We're starting to see it swing back towards that way, though, because a lot of colleges are starting to go to 34s now. A lot of them want the faster players, the faster linebackers, because they can cover receivers as well, or they can cover receivers over the middle. They cover tight ends as well. I think the 34 is the better defense, but if you can stack out the 43 and say, our guys are just better than your guys, and here they come, I'm okay with that too.
And Chuck's agreeing with me. He said that's what they did in Indy, and they dropped Robert Mathis back in coverage, and he hated it. And he said that's why they make the big bucks, and he's just a lonely truck driver.
I understand, Jeremy. Look, nobody's paying us huge money to tell them that their defense is flawed either, and Justin Houston needs to go forward, and Robert Mathis needs to go forward.
You're getting paid small money?
Well, I'm not getting paid what you're getting paid. Going back to this, I just think that a lot of it just comes down to understanding your personnel. I think a lot of it is just the defensive coordinator being too smart for his own good and saying, I'll just trick everybody, and I'll drop Robert Mathis. I'll drop Justin Houston. Sometimes when a guy rushes the passer that well, you just turn him loose.
Yeah.
And you can sit there and say, even from a 34, this guy's coming every play. Let me see you stop it. All right, guys, it's been a great show. Obviously,
great show.
We don't always agree on everything. We don't always agree on all these bracket picks, but I like a lot of your picks. I like especially the end of the tournament for you guys. I think this is going to be fun. We can't wait to talk about that going forward. We're still going to be all over football because that's the bread and butter. We're going to be talking about that. We can't wait for more news out of the NFL as well.
Kyle, I hope we made you happy talking about Chiefs free agency. You haven't said much since then, so I don't know what your opinion is. Go ahead and message us. Let us know what you think about it. We love talking sports with you guys. And I want to give a special thanks out to everyone that commented and joined us tonight. It's been great. We appreciate having you. We love talking sports with you. But real quick, Michael, Matthew, Nathan, Jerry, David, Joe, Jonah, Brian, Shay, Rob, Josh, Maddie, Sharif, Kyle, Eric, Ken, Jeremy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Show is always a lot better with you guys. Obviously, it's why we do it. We love interacting with you. It's been really fun. I like your picks. Again, I can't wait to see how this matches up because if I go ahead and beat you, I'm going to be talking about that all the time. If I don't, we're not talking NCAA until the tournament is over. I'm kidding, of course. It's going to be fun to match up against everybody. I can't wait to see this NCAA bracket break out. And obviously, the fun starts tomorrow, Drew. I can't wait for it. I know you can't either.
I'll be watching it.
So for Sports Around the Bar, I'm Jake, your bartender. This is Drew, and we will see you guys next time.
See ya.